So, the history of the Air and Space Museum began with a man named Joseph Henry around 1861 or so. He asked for a man named Thaddeus Sobieski Constantine Lowe to meet him on the mall in front of the Smithsonian Museum to blow up this amazing, incredible balloon and fly with him all around on the mall. That actually sparked a ton of people's interest in the concept of flight and air travel. After that, within the same year, China sent over 20 kites for the United States to kind of fly all together as a sign of peace and caring and love. After that, everybody that was around the area thought to themselves, holy cow, flight, air and space, the whole concept of flying kites and balloons and being up in the sky, amazing. Let's put together what it is that could involve air and space into something that people can kind of take a look at. Originally, the Air and Space Museum was actually held in a shed behind the Smithsonian Castle. But as technology grew, so did the amount of stuff in that shed. Flight was discovered, then radar, then space travel, and flying to the moon. The shed was just way too small. So in the 1970s, they decided to build where the Air and Space Museum is today. Recently, Jeff Bezos donated $200 million for a brand new wing for the Air and Space Museum. This wing is dedicated to education and space. The Air and Space Museum houses some of the coolest inventions that we have for space travel. The X-59 quiet supersonic technology is supposed to fly a completely quiet airplane over land. So the history of the Air and Space Museum seems a little short, and there's really not much more to talk about because the whole idea of the museum kind of developed along with technology. But while I was reading about the history of the Air and Space Museum, I started to read about some pretty cool things about the Wright brothers and then some controversial things. So let's delve into that before we end this video. Here are some interesting facts about the Wright brothers' first flight. Number 1, Orville Wright was the first to fly in the Wright Flyer based on only a coin toss. Otherwise, it would have been the other brother. Neither brother received a high school diploma. They were super duper close, and they both dropped out of school together, and they both concentrated on air flight together. The Wright brothers flew the Wright Flyer only one time. It actually crashed afterwards when they tried to fly it a second time, and they decided to take it and put it into storage. And originally, believe it or not, they didn't want to donate the Wright Flyer to the Air and Space Museum, even though they asked and asked and asked and asked repeatedly. The only reason why the Wright Flyer is in the Air and Space Museum is because the Smithsonian played a trick on Wilbur. They made a gigantic announcement saying that the Wright brothers were not the first ones to actually fly a flying machine. And because of that, Wilbur got so angry that he donated the Wright Flyer to be able to prove them wrong and rewrite history. Now let's talk about the controversy that surrounds the Wright brothers. What's really interesting is that they are credited with flying the very first airplane, right? Well, there were a bunch of other flying machines that actually flew, some even farther than the Wright Flyer, long before 1903. In 1783, the very first hot air balloon took flight. And in 1852, the very first Zeppelin, which is kind of like a powered balloon, took flight. In 1890, the very first machine that was heavier than air took flight. And in 1894, the first controlled heavier than air flight took place. In 1901, the first controlled powered rigid body flight took place. And that one actually ended up having passengers. And in 1903, that was when the Wright brothers finally flew. Now, why do you think they were credited with having the very first flying machine, when in actuality, there were all those other flying machines, some of which were powered, that occurred long before? What historians suspect is that it had something to do with photography. Even though photography existed in the 1800s and there were pictures of these other flying machines, what they believe is that in 1903, there were multiple pictures of the airplane flying, and therefore it could be validated. So that's why they suspect the Wright brothers credited with having the first flight. All right, so this was a really fun video to do. I think you guys voted for a great place for me to go. I might be able to hit up Washington's Mount Vernon the next time I head out of town, so keep your fingers crossed. But next will be Algeria and then Antarctica, and then there's a couple of other ones that I want to do from around the area too. Keep your fingers crossed that the weather gets a little bit better, and I hope everybody stays warm and safe. All right, see you guys next time. Bye.